So, Congressman, you had a meeting today with the conference and Speaker Boehner and other members of the leadership. Just talk to us about what happened in the room. What was the mood like, and what was the sort of flow of the meeting?
Yeah, lots of conversation, obviously, about what's going on the next 2 weeks in the lame duck, and then a lot of conversation about the president, his decisions dealing with immigration, and the constitutionality of that, how the Congress should respond, regardless of whether it's immigration or not. When a president steps in and says, I'm going to set aside a huge chunk of the law and I'm going to try to do something different than what that states, Congress has got to find a way to be able to respond to that that's both appropriate, but it's also very clear.
But in the room, Congressman, was there disagreement about how to proceed, or the Speaker laid out his plan and everyone agreed?
No. There's, I don't know of a time you'll ever get everybody together with the Speaker and he lays out an idea and everyone says that's a good idea. There's a lot of conversations. Everyone's elected to be a leader. There are a lot of ideas that come to the room. It was a good conversation
what would you say,
different ways to approach that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Congressman. What would you say was the most dramatic moment in the meeting?
Oh, I don't know. There was a drama meeting, honestly, in the meeting. A lot of ideas had bounced up. There's three things that came up consistently. If we're going to respond to this, it has to be responded to legislatively. We have to use the power of the purse. That is the constitutional element of it. And we also have to find a way to respond judicially as well. This is a pretty serious issue that ultimately is going to end up in the courts and has to be resolved, not just for this president and this particular issue, for any president, because this sets a new precedent. Can any president look at this large chunk of the law, what's clear from the Constitution and clear from the acts of Congress, and just say, I want to do something different. Congress didn't move fast enough, and so I'm going to do what I want. What's that time period that the president has the authority to say, if Congress doesn't move fast enough, I can just change and move? That's not consistent with constitutional principles, and so we have to figure out what to do with that and how to respond appropriately.
Congressman, you talked about responding with the power of the purse. There's a lot of people who are interpreting what the Speaker's plan is basically a symbolic action. Do you think there's actually that what you guys have decided to do with the power of the purse is actually going to have any actual tangible consequences?
Well, one way to find out. We actually pass it and start working through the process of that. I think that is an appropriate way to be able to respond. What we're talking about is trying to pass. There are 11 total appropriations bills that would move. Of the 12 total that happen, 11 of them would move fully for the entire year. We'd take the Department of Homeland Security and we would set that one aside and do that one for 3 months and say, as the president begins to roll this plan out, we see it, we want to say this can happen. And this is not appropriate use of that. So that would be funded until March.
Congressman, some of your colleagues had talked for a while about the notion of actually tying the funding of the entire government to this immigration thing. I don't know what your position was on that, but that's obviously been discarded. Do you think that right. You guys are taking kind of half measures here, or do you should be pursuing this in a more aggressive way?
I think we're pursuing it in an aggressive way that is consistent with what the president has done. There's no reason for veterans to not have pay and for veterans to worry about what's going on because the president's done this action with immigration. So I think you focus in on the specific area that the president's actionable on, and that we would actually respond appropriately with that. What you have to know is, as the courts begin to unwind this, the courts are not going to look at press releases. The courts are going to look at what has Congress done. What is the congressional response? When you look at Article 1 responsibilities, Article 2 responsibilities, the courts are going to try to determine, has Congress spoken on this? We need to speak clearly on this.
Congressman, regardless of what you'd like to see get done in the lame duck session, now that you've made this decision, what do you think will get done? What will pass both the House and the Senate and get to the president in the next month?
I think this funding bill, funding 11 different areas of the government, holding that one and just doing that one for 3 months, I think that will pass. I think the tax extender bill will pass, and I think that's a problem, actually. The House and the Senate had done a pretty large-scale negotiation on tax to try to bring some permanency to things like the 179. That's a small business tax deduction. That's very important. That moves to permanent rather than every year it expires. We tried to do that. The president stepped in and said, if you're not going to actually give what's called the earned income tax credit and a larger amount to additional people, then he's not going to support that. The problem is, I hate to go back to immigration on this, but the problem is we're not going to extend earned income tax credit to this broad base because he's trying to move 5 million additional people into that. Those folks would then be eligible for this earned income tax credit. So it's not just moving people from illegal status to a recognized status. It's also extending $5,000 to each of them from American tax dollars and the earned income tax credit. That whole deal blew up. We still do have to do something on that, but the real deal that actually would have solved a lot of the problems just ended dealing with the immigration plan as well. We have to deal with the TRIA, that's the Terrorism Risk Insurance Plan. So there's some pretty big issues still sitting out there.
Congressman, you came back to immigration, so I'm going to come back to immigration with you.
Sure.
We've asked this question of a number of your colleagues over the course of the last few weeks, and I'm curious what you have to say about it. We know you really disapprove of what the president's doing here on this executive order, but what is your plan? What's your proposal to deal with the 11 or 12 million undocumented immigrants who are currently living in this country?
What's interesting is the House has already started that process. I know the president likes to talk all the time and say the House has no plan. It's not true. The House, if you go back to even November, December 2012, the House passed a bill dealing with high-skilled immigration visas. Those visas should have been approved. The president came in and said, if you don't do everything, we'll do nothing. The House came back in August of this year and dealt with a border-first security measure dealing with securing the borders, increasing the opportunity for the judges to be able to do video conferencing to expedite the immigration process. Again, the Senate didn't take that up. The president won't take that up. First things first, we've said it over and over again, you have to deal with border security, you have to deal with internal security, and then you get to the end, you start dealing with the folks that are here.
Just real quickly, stipulated all those things, border security, all that stuff really matters. There's still 12 million undocumented immigrants in the country. What should be done with them?
Yep, not all of them are the same. Some folks have criminal records. Some folks came when they were 2 years old, brought by their parents. The folks that came over when they were 2 years old, brought by their parents, haven't violated any law. In America, we don't hold children to account for the crimes of their parents. And so those children should have a separate process that they would go through. People that came through on a legal work visa that have overstayed it, they'll have a separate process to be able to work through. All these matter. You can't treat all 11 million exactly the same because they didn't all come exactly the same. But the one thing you cannot do is take 11 million people and jump them ahead of the people that have been waiting in line and trying to do this the right way and slow down the process for others.
All right,
that is my concern.